Welcome to Let's Get Writing Author Reads. And this is one of my favorite parts of what I do each week because my guests are on the interview show and then they come over and we do another section so that we get to see a little bit more behind the scenes and behind the scenes or between the covers. Here we go. This book today. Hey, Emily, we're twins. Yeah, so welcome. My guest is Emily Hepditch, and she's a young author who hails from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland and Labrador. And Emily, how are you today?
I am wonderful, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. And you have your second book out. I've read both of your books. I've read let's put this up here. I've read The Woman in the Attic. And now I just finished, because it's fresh out,
Yes.
Alone on the Trail, which is an ominous title. It kind of gives you a feeling for where this is going.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And Emily, you have a book launch coming up tonight here virtually.
Yes,
and
I do.
I'll just put the information up for that in case anyone wants to jump on there this evening. Emily will do a bit more reading, but we have her now. Emily, tell viewers a little bit about your book and what they can expect.
Perfect. So my new book is called Alone on the Trail, and it follows the story of four friends who decide to take a trek through the Long Range Mountains. They kind of find themselves in a situation where they haven't prepared properly, and some tensions begin to brew in the friend group. So it kind of tracks their journey as they get themselves into some trouble and then have to find their way out of it. So what I'm going to be reading today is I'm going to be reading a little section from chapter 1, so you can kind of get a view of how of the setting and how the story is going to be told. And then I'm going to jump over to a quick chapter narrated by a different character, just so you can kind of get a sense of some of the different voices at play in the story.
And Emily, it was rather interesting the way you did this book. The chapters are done more or less by characters. And it worked. It actually worked extremely well, I thought. And it's not that often that you see a book written that way.
No, it's definitely one of my favorite types of books to read. One of my favorite authors is Lisa Jewell, and she writes just compulsive thriller novels, and she likes to do this a lot. And I find it gives the story kind of more beef. There's more perspective and more manipulation that can go on through that, and I think that's so much fun.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, because you get to go into the heads of everybody and you get to hear what they're thinking about another character and what that character thinks about them. And yeah, very cool. And this thriller feeling, and anyone who knows Newfoundland knows that our wilderness can be quite rugged, can be quite challenging. So Emily, I'm going to let you take this away and thrill us a little.
Okay, thank you so much. So the first part that I'm going to read is part 1, and it's told through Sadie's perspective. The bow of the shuttle glides through open water, black and deep, cold as the sea. The endless dark wall of the fjord looks down on the boat, blocking the heat of the sun. Overhead, clouds cast shadows over the length of the boat, cutting the light into slats across the top deck. Strange to think in a few hours we'll be climbing up that towering fjord, like a staircase into the sky. I tuck myself deeper into the neck of my fleece and shiver against the wind. When Jonah suggested we do a 3-day trek through the West Coast wilderness, none of us took him seriously. He was Jonah, after all, self-proclaimed indoorsy Jonah, who had in his lifetime conquered nothing beyond a couple of 3-kilometer pondside public walking paths which had, as he described, treachered him. When he waved the National Park pamphlet in my face during our statistics lecture, I had stifled a laugh. You aren't serious, I said. But he was serious. Picture this. You, me, Morgan, Julie, stomping through the woods in the middle of nowhere. He made a square with his fingers and implored me to join in on a fantasy, a scene from his personal reel of action movies where he himself plays the titular role. Jonah, it's not that simple. But it's cheap. He waved the pamphlet again, flashing his peroxide-whitened signature Jonah smile. Maybe that's how he swindled us, his charm. He stands beside me now on the upper deck of the shuttle boat, near the nose, gripping the painted railing with white-knuckled hands. His eyes scan around the looming walls of the fjord that surround us, gawking up as if it's a humbling reminder of his size. The mountains remind you of the inevitable, that you are only a minuscule speck on the face of the earth. I can't help but feel it too, a loss of control in the expanse of the outdoors, a sense that the wilderness has just as much a hand in your fate as your own decisions. I twist my grandmother's ring around my middle finger. Julie stands on my left side, her blonde ponytail fluttering in the wind behind her. Her eyes are closed, her mouth slightly open. She holds the rail for balance, but only tightly enough, allows herself to tilt with the gentle rock of the boat. She's probably lost in one of her mindfulness moments, separate from the world. There's a rattle of footsteps on the iron staircase in the center of the deck behind us. I turn around to find Morgan ascending. He carries 4 shallow plastic cups of beer at shoulder level, pinching the rims with a steely, 4-pronged grip. He's moments away from an accident, if the boat jerks or moves too suddenly, but somehow he manages to navigate the short walk in our direction without losing a drop of beer. Composed as always. "Milady?" He hands a cup in Julie's direction, then one in mine, and finally one in Jonah's. Small golden bubbles roil up from the bottom. The cup barely holds half a can, but it's ice cold and dreamlike beneath the opulent apricot sun. "To adventure," Morgan says, raising his plastic cup in the air. "Adventure," everyone cheers. Then we swallow the beer, 3 long, sharp gulps, and crush the cups like high school kids. To adventure. And I'm going to jump along to a short chapter narrated through Jonah. So he is the character who initiated this trip. Once Morgan slips away, Julie and Sadie start whispering to each other, and I am left to my own devices in the aisle seat. There's no consistent self-service this deep into the mountains, and we're still an easy 15 minutes away from the port. I stand up and decide to meander. There's a few dozen people piled onto the upper deck who have clearly forgotten about me already. They're more fascinated by the cliff walls than by the hikers attempting to trek through them. An old woman peers through the eyes of an enormous pair of binoculars, cooing at the trees made misshapen by the wind. I smile at her as I pass by, but she doesn't even notice me. Why would she? That nasty little voice in my head speaks up, clear and resonant. You are unremarkable. Maybe another drink. The stairs to the lower deck quiver when you descend, and with the gentle rock of the boat I find myself gripping onto the rail for balance. The sun fades away as I move south, the cool breeze soothing against the sun skin of my arms. The lower deck is less crowded than at the top, and there is a different vibe to the voices. I push past a group of men in sport shirts who are disenchanted by the glorious views around them, and then open the door to the galley. Inside, the galley smells of deep fryer and slightly of vomit. A seasick woman has her cheek pressed against the window. She raises her can of ginger ale, and on first glance I assume it is for me, but then she presses the cold metal against her forehead miserably. At the concession stand, a bored-looking teenage girl leans against the counter, dragging her finger back and forth through a sprinkle of salt on the metal surface. "Canadian," I say, to which she nods and moves for the cooler. There is no one looking for adventure on the bottom deck, clearly. Most everyone wears casual clothes, Adidas sneakers, floppy sun hats. I paid almost $200 for the fleece tied around my waist, and it feels somewhat betraying that no one seems to have noticed it. The girl at the counter returns with my beer. $10 for the bottle, which floors me. I wouldn't normally spend that much on a beer, but the girl has already popped the cap off, cold vapor whirling from the tip. Bitterly, I snatch the bottle and sip, reveling in the rush of barley comfort. I move to the galley door and close it behind me, returning to the outer bottom deck. I scan around and decide to move to the nose of the boat for a breath of fresh air. As I round the corner, I notice there are already people at the top. One has the unmistakable silhouette of Morgan, all calves and shoulders, and he's got his camera to his face, taking a photo of some girl. It's probably not what it looks like, and yet I find myself cowering back into the shadows when I see him glancing around, checking over his shoulder for onlookers. For a moment, I sip the foam off the top of my bottle and contemplate what to do. He lied about going to the washroom, just to do this, and Julie, his girlfriend, is upstairs, oblivious. Do I confront him? Interrupt them so that this, whatever the hell this little impromptu photo shoot is, doesn't get any further? I take 2 steps in Morgan's direction when a rattling sound catches my attention. Walking down the aisle now in the direction of the galley is another guy about our age. He wears a polo vacation shirt and a pair of burlap flip-flops. As my head turns, our eyes meet, and a cold current moves through my body. The guy pauses, just briefly enough to contemplate who I am, like he can remember. With no luck, he keeps going, sends me a curt nod, and then opens the door to the galley. My concern for Morgan's actions evaporates, because my own anxiety has doubled in size. I take a long, powerful mouth of beer and wonder how I'm going to stomach the rest of the boat ride, knowing that guy is here on board, knowing what I did to him. So that's Joan's part.
Woohoo!
Yes.
It does sort of set the tone, definitely, that there are things in the mix that it's all not going to be fun and games on that trip. No. Wow. But I'll tell you one thing you did accomplish in getting me when I read this book. I definitely am interested in hiking that trail, believe it or not. I've never gone on that trip into the fjord, and I definitely want to do that. I mean, I wouldn't hike that trail without a guide. I'll tell you that. Yeah. No, it's remote, and I'm sure it could be pretty challenging, as the hikers will find out. But
Yeah.
but definitely, I think. How about this, Emily? Do you feel that Newfoundland as a location lends a lot to writers?
Absolutely. I mean, the Newfoundland is so unique in so many ways. But we have such, and it was kind of the same thing with the woman in the attic. We have such a unique landscape here. I mean, we have this sort of rugged barrenness surrounding us, and then kind of no matter where you are, you drive for even a couple of hours and you have access to the ocean, and the ocean kind of feels um, like it's everywhere at once. So we kind of have an innately haunting landscape here in the province, and I think that works so well both for gothic style fiction and for thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing too, especially about these woods, is that these trails are not always so crowded. So you kind of have that loneliness inherently in these parts of the world, or in these parts of the province where these stories take place. So definitely.
Yeah, we're definitely not a crowded province, and there's many places where you can go and you can find yourself by yourself. Certainly, in your first book, that house, the image of the older, I think it was a salt box style house. It was on the cover, I think. I don't have that book here with me, but when you see those houses, sometimes perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the ocean, windswept, not a lot of trees necessarily, you can, it almost puts you a little bit on edge if your mind goes in that direction. How alone you might be in a house like that. How isolated you could be. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have lots of places like that here on the island, and the geography changes depending on where you go. A completely different feel, for example, if you go into the Codroy Valley, which is so lush and warm, but it's at the base of those mountains where the wind sweeps down and blows a transport truck off the highway just like it's a twig. Absolutely. So, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I guess is what you'd say. But our province is a great location, and of course, you're not the only author that takes advantage of that. I've had Kevin Major on here, and his book, Two for the Tablelands, is set in the same area of the province as yours, and again touches upon that. Yeah. So a lot of authors are taking advantage of our province to create some great stories. Emily, I put up your virtual book premiere up there on the screen again, just to remind people. So have fun this evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me on.
Always a pleasure, and I can't wait to have you on again. I expect it'll just be another few months, and there'll be another book.
Who knows? We'll see. We'll have to see.
Are you working on something?
I'm actually working on some children's literature right now. That's been another bucket list item. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of time off from writing scary novels and instead move over to some children's stories and maybe feel a little bit happier when I'm reading.
Warm and fuzzy. Cool. All right. Well, as I said, we're going to jump on to Instagram. So if people want to, technically you can follow us right now. And if you're seeing this later, well, check out the Instagram account. And I'm just going to pop this up here now for any of the shows. And I will mention that Emily did a full half-hour show on Let's Get Writing last year. Some great information there as she was starting and what inspires her and tips and so on. So you can be sure to check that out. And she was on as a guest on the show we shot today, along with Keith Mercer, who is an historic author. And he talked about this book right here, Rough Justice. Cool. So he had a book launch last week. All right, Emily, well, let us say goodbye, and I will see you shortly on Instagram. Bye, everyone, and thank you for, sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for enjoying the shows, and always I appreciate your comments and feedback, and if you'd like to subscribe on YouTube, that'd be lovely too. Have a great day, everyone. Bye for now.